Minutes after 7 o'clock, we are having the discussion on the road to election here on the program. My guests are still here with me, and we want to talk a little bit now about the numbers game. That's what it's all about. IEBC finally giving us the results of that audit report. There are now 22,120,458 voters. Bobby, I'd like to start with you. What do you make of, what is needed? I think the dailies today are taking a look at what it would take out of these registered numbers to garner the 50% plus one. Many saying would be great to have around one win that would be decisive. Of course, anyone who wants to take the petition to the Supreme Court is definitely free to do so. But what do you make of the numbers? Obviously, not as many as were expected to register as before, because we're, at 19 million before, and then just added about 3 million, considering the process of voter registration is supposed to be continuous throughout the 5-year period?
Yes, and probably hot on the heels of your last point, we have to ask ourselves why we have not been able to significantly increase the number of registered voters. And this particularly considering that most new voters tend to be the young or the youth who previously had not attained the age of majority to be able to register as voters. And so the continuous and also the mass voter registration exercises definitely, to a large extent, target this cohort of society. But as you rightly put it, we've seen that this has not tremendously increased. But we saw it during the various mass voter registration exercises that IEBC conducted, that unfortunately they were not able to hit the targets that they had prepared or anticipated. And perhaps this goes to the issue of how elections have been previously conducted, the rhetoric, the messaging that the youth of the country are receiving about elections, and but also the politics at large. Perhaps the apathy and the lethargy and also the cynicism is arising from the fact that many young people in the country are not looking at politics, at elections, as voting, as the wherewithal for the improvement of their lives. And that's why they're not coming out to participate. They're not coming out to register so as to enjoy or exercise this political right that is enshrined in the Constitution. Be that as it may, I think right now what the political parties and the candidates will be looking at, crunching the numbers, to ensure that they meet the two critical thresholds, the 50% plus one, and also ensure that in at least 24 counties, and this is the presidential candidates, that they do at least secure a quota of the registered voters who turned out to vote, so as to win these elections. So I think the release of these numbers is now going to give the different teams the proper algorithms to work with, to look at what the figures are. I think for such close elections, right from each ward, probably each polling station, how each candidate is faring thus far. Yes, we've been hearing of numbers and figures coming from different pollsters, but I believe, and prudently so, that the different candidates and parties are also running their own polls, which are going to give them a scientific indication of how they're performing in each and every corner of the country. And now they're going to use these figures that IEBC has released to re-strategize and to see how their game plan between now and August 9th should be played out, where they should put more effort, perhaps where they feel as of now they're secure enough, and where, sometimes you have to know that you win some and lose some, that probably you should just be able to say that in that area we'll have whatever God gives us, because the fate is sealed. So going forward, I think now the campaigns are going to be better crafted, scientifically, using numbers, knowing what is to be targeted. And I think this is important again, as we disambiguate the numbers, depending on the different cohorts, whether gender, youth, the elder members of society, persons with disabilities, etc. I think this is very, very useful going forward. Might be late in the game, but I think critically so also, because resources also for these campaign teams are very important, and in terms of how they can be utilized optimally. And this platform now ensures that this can happen.
Yeah. 1 billion shillings was set aside for the voter registration exercise. In October last year, that was when they had the first mass voter registration. The target was 137,000. They didn't meet that target. Later on, in February, they had a target of 91,000, didn't meet that target. I know it's a little late in the day to talk about this because, that process is now closed, I think, until after the election. But you have 1 billion shillings set aside for this, and then you don't meet the targets. Just what is going on, and who ideally would have been responsible for this? Because we had one IEBC official saying, well, the political class didn't do enough to mobilize their numbers. But then, one would argue that this is purely an IEBC affair, and to depend on the political class, which they can do, but are not necessarily responsible for. So, how is it that we're here with 22 million voters? What does this tell us, this apathy? And that is just the number of registered voters. The turnout will be something else on August 9th.
I think the question is, and was at the time of registration, is IEBC doing two things? One, civic education. It has the responsibility of doing civic education. Voter education, tell people why it is important to vote. Every year we have got so many people turning 18 who are new voters by dint of the fact that they have attained the required age. There is no civic education that happens in schools, and IEBC did not carry out civic education. At least we have that on authority from them, that they didn't do civic education. Now, when you are doing civic education, you design messages for your target audience. So, let alone that they didn't do, there was no messages for young. And young people were asking questions which were never answered. Why are we registering? What is going to be the impact of our voting, of our participating in the vote? And those questions could only be answered through IEBC conducting civic education and designing messages that would respond to the issues young people raised. So, nobody, had the time to do that. I don't know where the money went. Maybe we'll get an audit of what it did. But clearly, that particular important segment was not mobilized. There were no messages for it, and they feel disconnected. I told you the other day that my daughter, for instance, told me that, I don't know why you want me to register. What is in it for me? And we spent a lot of time talking about it.
Did she eventually register?
Yes, she did, eventually.
Okay. Do you think she will wake up and go vote on the 9th of August?
That one we are going to deal with. But it is after I had sweated for so long, trying, because now you can't use parental authority.
No, you can't, yeah.
They are telling you, explain to me slowly.
Right.
Why is it? You have voted how many years? What change have you brought? Now tell me just what change. Now, so if I vote, is this the way we want to continue establishing government? And you get afraid because young people, that kind of radical thinking. But nobody target message to them.
And that's why 39.84% of the registered voters are between the ages of 18 to 34. That means, 70% are above the age of 35. So that tells us something about the youthful vote, doesn't it?
Basically, therefore, it means a great majority of young people will not vote.
Yeah.
They have no faith in the system. They don't see the reason why they don't connect with the elections, which is a tragedy, actually, because governments and countries depend on young people to design and think about policies for the future. There are even lower number of young people going in for electoral seats. I think we may need to do an analysis nationally. How many people are going for electoral seats who are young people?
Yeah.
Maybe they have been also crowded out by the old people, like they have been crowded out in the register. Yeah.
Interesting. So, you take a look at those demographics now, Murigi.
Yes.
So 39.84% of the registered voters are between the age of 18 to 34. Yes. And yet, the political formations that we've seen, even if you take a look at the four presidential teams, have all been trying to gain some sort of youthful approach. Either you're having youthful artists at the launch of your manifesto, or the launch of your formation, or very deliberately going out to the youth. I mean, we've seen Professor Wajakoya campaigning in bars and maybe in hotels, and perhaps being the more youthful candidate. So what do they do now that they've got these numbers? I mean, I think male and female is just about the same. There's not that much of a difference. It's 50.8 of males and 49.12 female. So how do they now start to tailor their message? Can they change that at any, and would it make a difference?
No, the reality is this, that prior to these these statistics, the youth were seen as a battleground. Battleground in this sense that everybody thought that whoever manages to win the youth vote at that point from 18 to 34 would have an upper hand against the other one. But now the reality has hit them that if you have 39% of the register comprising of between 18 and 35 youth, basically what you have the youth, and knowing them from the polls that we've had, there's so much of voter apathy from amongst them. So chances are even almost of that registered demographic, only say 70 to 80% will turn out to vote. So what that means is that you even have a reduced number of them participating in those elections. But I think one thing that has hoodwinked people into believing that we had a higher number of youth participating in the elections is the kind of activity that they've been involved in. For example, when it comes to rallies, they're the ones who always flock there. Rallies, yes, right. In social media, they are the most active. If you look at their posts, in most of these, let's say the polls that are conducted online, say on Twitter, I believe the majority of Kenyans on Twitter are below the age of 50. You won't. I don't think you'll have so many of course, and majority actually youth, the ones that are right now. And so I think it was that demographic where if you conduct a poll, you see a very high activity amongst that demographic. So maybe the reality is coming has hit them that the focus now has to shift, even in terms of their messaging. That will also be important in terms of the manifesto, the approach that you are going to take. So basically, you will see some form of change in tact amongst the candidates going forward. But at the same time, I think it's still a crucial number. If you require a win, if the election is going to be a tight and contested election, these 39% might be the determining factor of who wins that election. And
the idea, I suppose, would be to rally them all, or, as many as possible to actually, wake up on August the 9th and get up and go to the polls and cast their ballot. So we're talking, you're going to say?
And the candidates, just moving from the idea of having crowds and thinking that crowds translate to
converting
voters.
That,
Maybe, like somebody said, maybe the people are going to rallies because they have nothing to do. And they are young people. So they have nothing to do. There is excitement. You are bringing music. You are going to give them some money. They go. So the crowds there before used to be factors to consider, who is attending my rallies. But now it could be crowds of non-voters and idle people who are looking for excitement.
And handouts.
Handouts and outing.
Or even voters who might not necessarily turn up on the 9th of August.
To vote.
Now, we're talking about numbers. So the voter turnout in 2013 was 86%. In 2017, slightly lower at 78%. you know, and 50% plus one threshold, Kawive, what would it take? I think the Daily Nation in the story today says for one to win, they would need to garner at least 9.5 million votes. That's obviously gone up due to also the increase in the number of registered voters this time around. But voter turnout is also, you know, an important thing, you know, going by what we've seen in the past. And we've had some pretty good voter turnout. So we won't even talk about the repeat election because that was something else in 2017, you know, after the Supreme Court petition. But what does it take to get, you know, as good voter turnout as we've seen in previous elections?
You know, it is the issues that are at stake during the vote that determine voter turnout. For example, in 2007, the issue at stake was the 2005 referendum, which bolstered people's hope in the fact that you can overturn a system, and then the fact of the MOU, which was being discussed for a long time. 2013, it was the question of the ICC debate. It was the international politics and domestication of that. Should the international justice system be a determining factor in the elections? So that's what people were, you know, getting out to say, sovereignty and all that. In 2017, the voter turnout was not very high because the issues were kind of not very sharp.
And there was an incumbency.
Yeah,
so,
there was an incumbency.
Yeah, this is different.
So it was a difficult thing. Now, today, we are looking at transition elections. We are looking at the possibility of a new government, which was not there. But the players are the same. They are the deputy president, who has been here for 10 years, and the former prime minister, who has been in the handshake for 3, 4, 5 years. So it is basically almost...
and who has won before?
Yeah, there's no great, we can say, outstanding motivation for people to go and vote. And so candidates must up their game if they want to get voters. They must demonstrate reason why people need to go and vote. Because that particular reason externally is not there. Motivation-wise, it's not there. Because Kenyans, if they refuse to register, you can be sure there are many people who are registered who are saying that if I had not registered, I would not be on that register, and who do not matter. So it's possible that even when we are talking about 50 plus 1%, if the voter turnout goes as low as 70%, then to win, somebody from these statistics, somebody will need like 7.75 to get 50.1.
Yeah.
If it goes to 83, 9 point something.
Yeah,
9.06.
Yeah.
So basically, voter turnout and voter registration, different things.
Two different things.
The possibility of a low voter turnout is there. It exists.
Yeah. And
therefore, the possibility of even a lower threshold for the 50 plus 1.
Yeah. Bobby, two questions for you. You know, what does a low voter turnout mean in terms of, you know, for democracy? That's number one. And secondly, what do you think will drive these 22 million registered voters to the polls? Kawive is saying, well, there's not much difference from the formations that we have seen. Many of the players are, you know, have been on the scene for decades in our political sphere. Is this an issue? Is this an election likely to be driven by issues? I mean, we've seen in certain places where, you know, the vote is a protest one, and sometimes it's a protest vote against, you don't want candidate X to win, and so you vote for their opponent. But so what sort of issues would be driving these 22 million voters to the polls 42 days from today?
Well, I think the first is the immediate one. And always we must remember that the elections, in as much as they're supposed to be issue-driven, most of the times people make the decision viscerally, emotionally pegged on the immediate circumstances surrounding the electorate's daily lives. And so right now, the big issue in every Kenyan's mind, and especially, parents, yes, we know we've been talking about the youth who are looking for jobs, who are looking for, something to be able to put in their pockets and, begin their lives. And this is escaping them with each rising day. And so the issue of the socioeconomic status and also the cost of living is going to be a very, very big determinant today going forward, determining also whether Kenyans will feel that their vote will make a difference to what they're going through right now or not. So that is going to contribute to whether many Kenyans will feel that they need to wake up on the morning of August 9 and go cast their vote, believing that probably that is going to help their plight, or they are going to be cynical and in a way vote with their feet, in a way, communicate their protest against elections and politics as a whole. So I think this issue, which, yes, many of the formations have been talking to or speaking to, I think is the one to be used to rally Kenyans to come out. The West African Senegalese writer Usman Sembene, in his book God's Beats of Wood, has a very beautiful phrase where he says, a hungry man will forget his way to the mosque. And so if Kenyans feel that their issues are not being properly addressed, and that is their socioeconomic issues are not being properly addressed within the political sphere, then I bet you that they will not come out to vote in the large numbers that we've been seeing before on August 9. But if the candidates, as they have been doing, but should double down on their efforts and convince Kenyans that their manifestos, their promises are indeed going to change this plight, then Kenyans will come out to vote. On the second limb of your question, what a low voter turnout means for democracy, there are two things that can be said. When you look at many Western countries, which by all intents and purposes, and especially when you look at the economic performances, when you look at the societies, function optimally well, rank highest in majority of the parameters that are used to gauge how nation states and peoples are faring. You tend to see that they have very low voter turnout during the election. In fact, you discover that majority of people tend to, keep a wide berth to daily political interactions and, for that matter, politics. And it's because, for a large, chunk of their times and the experiences of lives, of their lives, things are properly run, and so they don't feel the need to give a lot of attention to the politics. But again, in one way or another, the politics work, the government's work, and this is reflected, as I said, when you look at the parameters attending to the livelihoods of the people. And so on the other side of it, and especially in countries like ours, where democracy is young, our statehood is for, if you understand the history of, statehood, is still toddling. And the problems that visit with the lives of, the electorate, you tend to see that there is a direct correlation and link between the level of interaction with politics and daily livelihoods. And so when you see, and that's why we've had very high voter turnouts before, and I think this is because of the reasons that have been given, but primarily that Kenyans did believe that a change in the political sphere can bring out change in their day-to-day lives, including the reason why they ushered in a new constitution back in 2010. A low voter turnout this time around may be indicative of the fact that Kenyans are losing faith in the political framework and the promise that it should give in addressing and improving their livelihoods.
Okay, thanks, Bobby. But gentlemen, let's have maybe a bit of a more honest discussion. We're talking about issues, we're talking about what would drive people to vote, we're looking at the demographics, but our elections are ethnocentric. We look at regions, how many numbers are we going to get from Mount Kenya, from the Western Bloc. We've even seen different political formations giving their political leaders targets. You must get us this number from, where you come from. And it is very carefully selected who are the leading lights in every political formation, right? So that you sort of have the face of Kenya, or the idea that different ethnic regions can see themselves in that particular coalition or formation and say, okay, yeah, we've got the Luhya vote, we've got the Central Kenya vote. Even a consideration in terms of who was picked as running mate. And so all of these things, it's a game of numbers, right? And you want to take a look at which community has that. Yes. And so in all of these things, where does it even matter that, X percentage is male or female or youthful or whatever? Murigi, when really, it's really about which region will give them which votes, and that's how the math is calculated.
The truth of the matter is this, that elections in this country have been tribal census at the ballot. That is how these elections have been. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I will say this, for the past 3-4 years, there's a side of the political divide that has been trying to turn, or I don't know how I can phrase it, that has been trying to redefine how the politics of this nation are conducted and how elections are conducted. And I would say this without hesitation, for example, is with the DP, when he came up with the bottom-up concept and all that. And the hustler versus dynasty.
Making this an economic question.
Yes, an economic question. And one of the things they've been, Kenya Kwanza has been doing and drumming across their political meetings is that this election will be about the economy. That is one thing the DP goes around drumming and saying, that this election will be about the economy, because he wanted to create another dynamic to this election. And this dynamic is what now is being dented by these numbers that you see, because most of the people that felt most aggrieved by the economy are young Kenyans between the age of 18 to 35. Most of the Kenyans who felt excited by the hustler and that narrative is that the same age bracket. So I think it was the belief that we have that our focus is on this age group, so we need to have the messaging for this group that made him come up with that hustler narrative or make this election about the economy. But the truth of the matter is that it's not going to be about the economy. And if you want to know that both sides have acceded to that, look at how they're doing their campaigns. There are areas where there are certain regions where they are camping. If you look at their circuits, the way they are going, they have divided themselves into teams. For example, in Azimio, Martha Karua is in one part of this country, Raila Odinga and his team are in this other part of the country. You go to Kenya Kwanza, Mudavadi and his team have camped in Western. They decided that they are going to camp in Western and ensure that they get the 70% that they promised DP Ruto. DP himself has been going to other parts of the country, and there is also now an aspect that we have also seen where Rigathi Gachagua himself has also now has a team that is going around with doing economic forums. I also noticed that there's a different team that had been assigned a part of ISTAD within Kenya Kwanza that comprises of Speaker Muturi and Machakos governor. So essentially what they're trying to do, we've gone back to the same demographics that we always talk about, and that is the regions. And the regions, and I will say this, is that regions, the issue of the regions is found even in the Constitution. There's a reason why the Constitution requires that a winning presidential candidate, in addition to getting the 50% plus one vote, must have 25% from at least 24 half of the counties. So you have to focus. You don't have just to focus. You cannot just win from one region.
Right.
So you have to focus in all those regions. So you will see that they have all mapped out. You have the strongholds, areas that are perceived as strongholds. They're the ones that they perceive as battlegrounds. And I was surprised to hear Governor Nanok yesterday talking about what they believe are UDA's strongholds that were previously viewed as Raila strongholds. And you can see there has been more focus in those campaigns. The DP has been there more than once, more than twice. So basically, I think that is the alignment that they're doing. But at the end of the day, it's a tribal arithmetic. It is those numbers that will matter at the ballot.
The Mnyoyayas of this world of Kenya, there's a community called the Wanyoyaya, will never be anywhere near a running mate. Why? Because of their numbers. And the numbers game happens. Of course, there has been polls saying that the swing votes, the swing vote counties will now go to Tana River, West Pokot, and others. You know, those arguments have been there. But majorly, we're seeing organizing around ethnic blocks. And we've seen, and it's unfortunate because even the question of issues, and that's why these elections is very challenging. The question of issues that you need to bring to the fore has become difficult to sell. It has become difficult to sell because people are saying, fine, issues, but who is our person in your government? What are we getting out of it as a community? And those are genuine grievances
which they don't typically get. I mean,
yeah, but it is good to have hope.
What benefits?
It's good to have hope.
Well, we've had hope for about 60 years in this country using that type of approach or mentality of having our person, in the big house. And I'm not sure it's always translated, if at all.
The country think, if there's something like a country think or the group think in this country from independence has been when our person is at the helm, we get everything. And there has been demonstrated. Kenyatta got half of his cabinet from among the Mount Kenya region. There was the same thing about, what Moi did to people in the Rift Valley. The same arguments, not much about Kibaki time, it was a bit balanced, but the same arguments like in 2013, 2017 saying, majority of cabinet positions went to certain ethnic communities that were represented at the top. There's a group thing, there's a national thing about our benefit if our person comes to the top. So, and we have been totally unable to translate as a nation to cohesiveness, to cohese, to have unity around things different from ethnicity.
Which is interesting because, when we have issues with the economy, that is felt across the board. I don't think there's anybody who has access to cheaper fuel, for instance, or cheaper, retail goods, or maybe there's some subsidized housing for persons of a community that is allied to your president or your governor. And so my question, Kawive, is the attempts by the deputy president to try and shift the conversation into an economic one. Maybe, we'll wait to see if that actually works. But how long would it take for things to change in that respect? When would we finally see an election where we're saying, it's about access to health or education, or, you see different coalitions saying, no, we're all about, social justice and that sort of thing?
No, in other countries, when the kind of things that are happening in today's Kenya were happening in those other countries, the whole country would have stopped. But look here, from last December until now, prices of everything have gone double. Your salary has not increased by that double if you are working. And if you are not working, then it means that you are not able even to purchase. Your purchasing power is zero. So the fact that many more Kenyans are becoming destitute, they are unable to buy, it has not mobilized us. Even to do a demonstration on the streets about unga. And the last time there was a demonstration by the social justice centers, the police were more than the demonstrators to go and clamp it down. And there was a lot of violence there, which is uncalled for. And therefore, Kenyans, I don't know what the problem is. I think we need to have a national conversation on what is it that can tick us, can make us respond to our suffering. But now, to the second point about the DP wanting to change the conversation, I think the mistake, in my opinion, that it did was to pit it as one group of people against others, hustlers and dynasties. And now the problem is, if you are a small car in the village, you automatically become dynasty. And no, now, having a small car in the village, it does not mean you are rich. It means you are able to move from one place to the other. So that's why it did not catch on a lot, because the support base was aggressional. It was aggression against one group of people, not necessarily rich, but able to meet their needs in the society, and therefore, you know, a person who has got 2 great cows becomes dynasty. A person who has got 1 goat becomes hustler. It couldn't wash, because that is not the way even wealth is thought about in this country. Whereas there are dynastic peoples and families, the message went down to the people, or it went to the various areas in a different way. So it was not well managed. I think that's the problem.
All right. So you wanted to add, Marie?
Yes, I wanted to add something.
Yeah.
When you talked about the economic suffering and everything that is happening, what is happening is the opposite in this country. Is that if people are disillusioned by the status of the economy, by the cost of living, I think people get depressed, they go back to their own cocoons. And I think, going by the opinion polls, it could be one of the reasons why you see the high numbers of either undecided voters or people who are not decided whether they are going to participate in the elections or not. So I think if the situation persists up to August, what is going to happen is that people will not cast a protest vote. People might even decide that we are going to cast a protest vote at home. People will stay at home, and there will be a voter apathy like never seen before.
Okay,
Yes.
that would be interesting. Gentlemen, we've got about a few more minutes to go. I want us to just conclude by talking about, you know, where we go from here. You know, IBC has obviously finished with the dispute resolution mechanism. The committee concluded its sittings, gave, you know, its findings to all of the candidates who are aggrieved, about 262 of them, if I'm not wrong. And now for some of them, they have the option to go to the next level, which is to the High Court and the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court, if they so wish, and if that would make some sense to them before, you know, August 9th, which is now just 42 days away. So, Bobby, I'd like your perspective on, you know, what happens next. Of course, there's been a lot of talk about the role of the IEBC in terms of clearing candidates, and to what extent they can. Some have argued that they basically, you know, were like Pontius Pilate and washed their hands of issues such as, you know, the academic qualifications, and said, you know, it is not within their mandate. Yet others argue that, you know, do it because it is within your mandate if you have to, you know, collaborate with other state actors in order to do so, but that the onus does fall on them. What are your thoughts around that concluded process, you know, and what happens next as some of the candidates are having their day in court?
I think we've said a lot about IBC, and unfortunately, but I think validly so, the negative aspects of its, you know, work towards preparation for these elections. However, we must also remember that IBC does not work in a vacuum. We must remember that the IBC needs the input of every Kenyan, the state, you know, political parties and candidates. We must remember that IBC, resource-wise, has been working with a very crippled, you know, fund, you know, right from human capital. We just have an IBC that was functionally and structurally compromised for a pretty long time. We have an IBC that whenever it seeks funding to conduct some of the processes that and activities that we've also criticized that it has not been able to optimally do so, is given you know, funds of funding in drops. And so we must also, as we criticize IBC, but not just criticize, but constructively, push it to ensure that it delivers credible, fair, and free elections. To recall that it needs the support of all of us. And we also must remember that, it's pretty much the eve of the elections, and the IBC as an umpire, as a referee, and if I may use, excuse me for those who are not football fans, the analogy of football, where we say that when in a football game, the referee is being talked more about than the game itself.
Yeah.
Is off with the refereeing. And so I think IBC, as I had earlier said, now that, quote unquote, the distractions are away, and I must commend and say that I think, as you observed, part of its decision-making is also must be prudent within the political scope and sphere that it is working within. And sometimes, working with the wisdom of Pontius Pilate, as they say, because I imagine if it did make some of the decisions that are being demanded right now at this stage of the election period, what it would do, the shadow it would cast for IBC going towards the voting day. And so sometimes, yes, using technicalities, it will leave these issues to the electorate and for Kenyans to decide. But for IBC, and we've said this before, I think now going forward, it must come out and clearly communicate, and especially on the issues that have been raised. I'd reassure Kenyans about the use of the KIMS kit, the digital transmission of election results, the issue of the register, the issue of transfers, voters being transferred without their commission. So all these issues, I think now IBC has time, and I think Murigi gave a very good proposal or suggestion that maybe we should be getting daily updates now going to the elections, updates that deal and communicate, and especially about the problems or the issues that Kenyans feel that IBC has not properly addressed. I think this will help build the confidence of Kenyans running towards the election day. But again, must end by saying we must also all support IBC. This is not an election for IBC, as many of us had and communicate. This is an election for Kenya and Kenyans. IBC is an enabler, so we must facilitate it so that it can also help us enjoy our political rights as enshrined in Article 38 of the Constitution.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bobby. An important point to raise about this being our election and not, it's about IBC and it's about them. I'll come to you, Kawive, for the final word. Murigi, let me start with you in terms of the courts and their preparedness to handle petitions. We know we've seen the statements from the Chief Justice. Of course, now many of these, some of these disagreements are going to the High Court. I believe Reuben Kigame and a number of others, even Gideon Mbuvi Sonko, contemplating going to the High Court. So at least in terms of resolving the disputes from now till then, and of course arising from the election, it's now all, in the hands and eyes of the judiciary. And what it would take, I think, in your view, to perhaps have an election that is so decisive that the winner or the loser says, okay, it's fair and square. Not that it is not their right to do so. I mean, they can exercise that right. But, we've had a Supreme Court petition 2013, 2017. What would it take for us to have a clear win that assures everybody, both winners and losers, that it was a free and fair exercise?
Disputes have always been there. And it's become commonplace to have these disputes as we head to elections. The good thing is that we've had an opportunity, especially with the presidential election, to deal with two petitions, 2013 and 2017, dealing with issues across the board, various issues. We believe the Supreme Court has settled very many of these matters. And that is the reason why, for once, you had 262 complaints filed before the IEBC Dispute Resolution Committee. Why? Because in 2017, in the Wajir petition, the Supreme Court was clear: if you have any pre-election dispute concerning a candidate, the same should be raised before the IEBC and settled there. So at least there is that clarity of the law that we've seen that has been developed over time. There are certain issues that we saw, for example, before the DRC. I won't, the Dispute Resolution Committee of the IEBC, I won't talk about them in depth, but I think they swept certain things under the carpet. Definitely candidates are going to challenge them at the High Court. So the next phase right now is that most of these disputes will find their way in the High Court in the form of judicial review. There are those ones that are going to succeed and they are going to be returned back to the IEBC. There are those ones that are going to be dismissed, and that would be the end of the road for them. One thing I'm assured of is that we'll definitely have a presidential petition in August. That regardless of whether you have an outright win or not. And under the circumstances, we've seen various candidates raising various issues. And as I don't want to say I'm a reasonable person, but as an observer, you see when you define a reasonable person.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. So, but as an observer, you can see some of these issues that are being raised by candidates. For example, the use of state resources, the use of violence and all these, the writing of letters to the various government agencies. You can always see there is people are preparing ground. Yes, people are preparing ground for this petition. But I'm sure we'll have a credible election. As Bob has said, we need to have faith in the IEBC. As long as there's transparency, people just need to see that we have a transparent election. And once that is possible, people will come out and vote, and we'll have a clear winner, regardless of whether we'll go to those petitions. But something else, you talked about election preparedness. So as we go to this one, I know the judiciary and CJ Com has been very has talked about it. So basically, at the level of the magistrates court, there are those ones that deal with the election petitions for the MCAs. So I know he has gazetted. She said that she said that she would gazette more and more magistrates to handle those matters, so they become like specialized election courts. At the High Court level, that is the same thing that is going to happen. We have seen there is an advert that went around by DSC. They're recruiting 20 more High Court judges and Court of Appeal judges. We hope that by the time we go to elections, they will be in office. So I'm encouraged looking at whatever that is happening and hoping that most of these disputes will be resolved. There is no reason why we should have an election dispute which is supposed to be resolved within 60 days, taking almost 5 years before it can be resolved. And I hope that going forward, with the levels of the preparedness of the judiciary that we have been informed, that those disputes will be resolved within the timelines that are required by the law. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes. Kawive, you have the final word.
I think there are several things. Number one, we are going to have elections on August 9th. That is a fact. So we need to prepare for it. Number two, IEBC, in my own opinion, has quite a number of challenges and gaps. And I think it's important that everybody steps out to help IEBC. This petition by civil society, in my view, is helping IEBC make a decision that will help it not get stuck on 9th. So the questions of civic education, voter education has not happened. I think everybody needs to start doing that. Even people who are on the campaign trail, or people, civil society and other organizations, and the media. We need to start doing voter education and basically mobilizing voters to come out and vote. And then I think in these elections, we will most likely get a very close elections unless the narrative of the campaigners sort of changes and there's a clear majority winner coming up. So it's important that I don't advocate for all matters, elections or political matters being subjected to justice system. There are political solutions to political issues. I think that's the route that we want to take, because sometimes we put our courts in so much spotlight, in so much adjudicating things that can be dealt with. Let people go and vote clearly so that there's a clear winner, so that even if there's a petition, it's neither here nor there petition, because there's clearly a winner. I think that's the thing, the spirit that we need to get as a nation. And to know that, whether IBC has prepared or not, we are going to have the elections, and therefore, as citizens in our different formations, we need to do what is possible for us to do. Yeah. The courts, the CAK must ensure that there is network coverage. Let them not start trading or telling IBC they don't have the... No, let them just do it, because they are able to do it. Yeah? So
everybody must...
Let everybody just get their good foot forward, and then we get this done. And for once, tuache maneno ya kushinda tukiagi about who won, who didn't. Well, let's have something that we can go home and say, even if I didn't like them, they won, so it's fine. Let's have that. Let's have closure. Yeah. We have had 3 successive elections that have had no closure. Let's get one that says, this is it.
Okay, even though the lawyer in Murigi, I'm sure, is screaming to say that it is anybody's constitutional right to raise a dispute within the courts.
He knows what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Kawive Wambua, who's the Executive Director of Inuka Trust, Bobby Mkangi, and Murigi Kamande, asanteni sana for being with us this morning and raising some of those important issues with respect to the IBC, the court process, the readiness, and indeed the battle for numbers. That is what it is shaping out to be, with the 22 million voters registered in the country. I want us to take a look at some feedback as we close. Your thoughts there. We've got Chalo Wardrossi saying areas where electronic identification of voters will not be possible, IEBC should use the manual register to identify voters. Other areas to strictly use electronic identification of voters. It's a quick and convenient way of identifying voters before they vote. JM Musoma says, considering our previous experiences with technology, IEBC has left our elections potentially exposed. Ignoring the backup of a manual register in a Kenyan election is like trusting a thorn next to a hanging balloon. I support the 6 lobby groups going to court. You can't fool with fuel, okay? Engineer Lazaro says IEBC should be fully funded and given adequate time to prepare for the election. Both parties should agree on manual identification as a backup in case of electronic failure. We cannot continue living in denial about network failures in the nation. Bob Otieno Owino says, I believe you mean IEBC should be left alone to do its work. Dragging them with court orders barely few months to the general election will affect efforts they have done and even make Kenyans have doubts about their credibility. Okelo Malimu says civil society organizations must stop fence-sitting and show the country direction to take on electoral matters. This should be done